We don't always know what's going through a student's mind when they misbehave in our classrooms. Maybe they're having a bad day. Maybe there's trouble at home. Maybe they're having problems with other students. As teachers, these are things we need to consider before making a discipline referral.
Julian, I've asked you to pay attention 3 times. Go to the office.
Sky's blue, water's wet, students are going to misbehave. But the question is, what do we do about it? Do we try to handle it on our own? Do we remove them from the classroom and say, see you tomorrow? Or do we turn our backs, cross our fingers, and just hope the problem goes away? Quite frankly, it depends, except for the last one. Please don't do the last one. Because as teachers, we can't just ignore misbehavior. We have to be realistic though. Sometimes there are problems that are bigger than us, and we're going to need some assistance. But a vast majority of the time, especially when there's a minor misbehavior, we need to be prepared to handle it on our own. Students need to see us, not someone outside the classroom, as the authority figure. So in today's episode, we're going to talk to an administrator and a guidance counselor and hear their real-world expertise on when we should or when we should not write a referral. As a teacher, one of the most important things that you can do is manage a vast majority of student misbehavior on your own in the classroom. Most misbehavior will be minor in nature and well within your ability to handle. You, however, must take responsibility for addressing these issues as they occur so students know that you and not them are in control. Now, let's take a look at some common misbehaviors that you are expected to control on your own in the classroom. Number 1, talking. Students in the United States are very social. They will talk in your classroom, but it's up to you to provide them with your expectations. When are they allowed to speak? At what volume? When should they remain silent, and when should they raise their hands to talk? Number 2, moving or fidgeting. This can be very distracting behavior, but one that students may have trouble controlling. So try to provide them with an outlet for the behavior, such as a classroom job that lets them move around, active learning strategies, or perhaps even a manipulative that they can use that won't make any noise. Number 3, missing work. When a student has a few missing assignments, we have to work with them to solve the issue. Make sure you're communicating which assignments they're missing and what impact it could have on their grade. Find out if there's a problem with understanding the material, then offer to help. Be willing to involve parents with this process. If the student misses a week or more of assignments, then you need to consider involving a guidance counselor. Number 4, minor conflicts among students. If a couple students can't get along without arguing, then it's time for you to take action. This might be as simple as reminding them of the proper way to treat each other, but it also might mean a seat change to separate them. Keep in mind that any situation that involves bullying or potential violence goes beyond a minor conflict and will need an administrator's attention. Number 5, being off task. Be prepared to redirect the student to the lesson. Hand signals are great for this. You can also use proximity control or a go-to phrase such as, "Let's stay focused." Also, consider your activity. Is it engaging enough? Good classroom managers can handle most misbehaviors in the classroom, but there are definitely exceptions. Anytime you have a student that's involved in violence, destruction of property, possession of illegal substances, or if they violate a major school policy, then you'll want to refer them to an administrator. but you have to be careful. There's definitely a right way and a wrong way to handle situations like this. Actually, we've just completed work on the holographic simulated classroom here at EPI headquarters. I think we ought to try it out with maybe a sample scenario. So computer, run program Pope Alpha. Whoa, computer, program Pope Beta. Wow, sorry, we're still working some of the kinks out, but does it look realistic in here? So now we're going to look at a scenario where a teacher is confronted with some extreme student misbehavior that may require an administrative referral. Let's take a look. Computer, start program.
In class, that is the difference between a simile and a metaphor. Amanda, why are you not taking any notes?
I don't take notes.
So you're holding a pen. You can take notes with that pen.
Oh, I got a pen?
Whoa, you're on very thin ice right now. You need to be careful. All right, that's it. We got it. We're going to the office. Come on.
That got out of hand pretty quickly. Who do you think was at fault? The student? The teacher? Both? Let's break this scenario down piece by piece to see where it went wrong and what could have been done differently.
In class, that is the difference between a simile and a metaphor. Amanda, why are you not taking any notes?
I don't take notes.
Let's start with the positive. At least the teacher addressed the misbehavior. But when dealing with non-compliance, it's much better to redirect the student than to give them the opportunity to answer an open-ended question. Here, the teacher could have said, Amanda, remember to take notes so you have them for your open note quiz, or used a hand signal to try to get her back on task. An open-ended question can lead to confrontation, as we'll see.
So you're holding a pen. You can take notes with that pen.
The teacher is starting to show a lack of control. Although you may want to say something sarcastic, it'll only cause you more problems in the long run. Engaging a student in this type of confrontation will only result in you looking bad, so avoid a back and forth conversation. If your initial management strategy didn't work and if the student's behavior isn't disruptive to the rest of the class, then you may want to wait for a break in your instruction to talk to the student one-on-one.
Oh, I got a pen?
Whoa!
Okay, now the misbehavior has escalated to the point where the administrator should be involved. Violent behavior, such as the act of throwing an object at a teacher, cannot be tolerated. At this point, the teacher needs to get the class onto another assignment, then contact the administrator as soon as possible.
You're on very thin ice right now. You need to be careful. All right, that's it. We got it. We're going to the office. Come on.
So like we discussed, the teacher is right to refer Amanda to the office, but his actions helped to lead to this conclusion. It could have gone a lot differently had he remained calm, provided clear instruction, and followed a logical set of consequences. Work to find a solution with your students rather than creating an antagonistic relationship. Students will be more likely to comply with a fair classroom manager. However, there are times when, despite your best efforts, you'll have to involve an administrator. To give us some more insight on that, I had the opportunity to sit down with a former principal in the studio earlier. Let's take a look. Computer, in program. We are very lucky to have with us today retired Principal John Barber. Principal Barber, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's my pleasure.
Great. So can you tell us a little bit about your history in education?
Sure, I'd be happy to. I've got a little over 30 years in public education. I've taught several grade levels. I was a special ed teacher for a while, for a span of my career. And then the last 18 years, I concluded as a principal, as an assistant principal and a principal at 3 different elementary schools of varying sizes, and ended at a fairly large school, about 800 children. So it's a combination of classroom experience and administrative experience, which I felt the classroom experience especially really helped me
Yeah.
and readied me for being an administrator.
Well, really happy to have you and
Thank
your
you.
expertise here.
Mm.
So if I could ask you a question,
Mhm.
when you go into a classroom or when you would go into a classroom to observe a teacher, what are some things that you looked for that
Mm.
let you know if they were a good classroom manager?
All right. That's a really good question because now you're going to be looking at it through the eyes of an administrator.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when I walked into a classroom, one, I wanted to see students that were engaged, either directly with the teacher or at a seat,
Mhm.
engaged in an activity, or in small groups.
Yeah.
And it would vary depending on what the lesson was. But I wanted to see a high level of engagement. You did not want to see a lot of off-task behavior.
Right.
Of course, in any classroom with 20 plus children, you're going to see some of that.
Mhm.
The question is, why is it there?
Mhm.
And is it disruptive to the others? I want to see a classroom that's bright. I want
Right.
to see children's work on the walls because that helps engage them. I always believed
Right.
it did because it gives them ownership of that classroom. But the main thing was I wanted to see children engaged.
Great, thank you. So when we're talking today a lot about student misbehavior,
Mhm.
so what are some misbehaviors that you generally expected teachers to be able to
Sure.
handle on their own in the classroom?
Sure. The types of behaviors that I would expect a teacher to be able to handle are just those talking out type of things, those little disruptive behaviors, which quite honestly you should be able to deal with on the fly.
Mhm.
And those type of things happen. Or conflicts within the classroom, conflicts between students. Maybe you go over there and intervene at that point. Talk to them, what's going on here? Those sort of things that are disruptive to the lesson, where a child is also just not engaging.
Mhm.
Because disruptive behavior can look differently.
Right.
It can be disruptive,
Mhm.
or it can be just a child that's sitting there not doing anything. And quite honestly, oftentimes that's what it is,
Yeah.
right? So I want to know what's going on with that child as a teacher. Why are they not engaging? And I would expect that teacher to try to figure that out and try to engage them back in again, right?
The minor misbehaviors.
Minor misbehaviors, those should be dealt with on the fly in a classroom. And really, and I know y'all have talked about this before, if you've developed that rapport and that relationship with your students, those sort of things can be taken care of that quickly.
So important.
So important. Now,
Because they become invested in you and they want to please you.
especially we're talking about elementary
Right.
children, their natural instinct is to want to please you, unless there's some other issues like some mental health issues that might preclude that. But most kids just want to please their
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
But they need to know that you're engaged with them.
Yeah.
So if you've got that normal engagement, those sort of behaviors are dealt with. But hey, they come up.
Right.
When I was in the classroom, it happened.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a quick, prompt re-engaging and move on.
Right. Good. So if we have a teacher who thinks that maybe the behavior has gone past something minor,
Sure.
and they're sitting down and they're considering whether or not they should refer a student to an administrator, what do you think is an important factor for them to think about in order to make that decision?
One, you have to think about what does this look like down the line?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. If I engage administration at this point, okay, and we always talk about this giving up your authority, giving up your power. I'll be truthful with you. I agree with that to a point. I'm not totally sure what that means. I have my own idea.
Mm-hmm.
If that child knows that you're not going to deal with me, but you're going to send me down the hall, right? And sometimes going down the hall, for some kids, it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? It gets me out of the classroom, right? There are certain behaviors that are deal breakers, right? If you have a child, one, if there's a physical conflict or a verbal conflict that you cannot de-escalate, yes, absolutely, you need to call for assistance. But also, I think it's really important for teachers to know there are multiple resources within a building. And it may be a situation that you could deal with at that moment before taking it to the office, right? But I will tell you as a principal, I had times when I felt like maybe there were a lot of referrals, and there were other times when I would walk into a classroom and I sensed immediately there were issues, and I wondered, why didn't I know about it? So I would also offer these words of comfort to a teacher. That administrator is there for you also.
Yeah.
And it may be, maybe not at that moment, but maybe you make an appointment or you just go by and see the principal after and say, this happened in the classroom today.
Yeah.
Can you help me out? Is there some, and maybe they'll engage other resources. But if you feel like you're alone, you're wrong.
Yeah.
You are not alone. In this day and age where we live with professional learning communities and rapport back and forth, talking to another teacher, There's all sorts of options for you.
It never hurts to have that conversation, to take a step away and get some advice.
Absolutely. And that's a really, really good point, because here's the other deal. When you feel like you're being engaged, right? And you have that voice in your head that says, this is really starting to get to me, right? At that point, you have to step away. You're the adult,
Right.
but you're also human. So at that point, you have to step away. And at that point, maybe it's very appropriate to call someone to come in and assist you, right? But if you feel like that child is kind of drawing you in and you're not able to de-escalate it or disengage, yes, by all means, you need to ask for someone to help. And I will tell you, as an former administrator, I want that too, because we don't want it to escalate into something that becomes another issue.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Guidance counselors can be an overlooked resource in the school. However, they are extremely valuable and can help both teachers and students with a wide range of issues. Here are 3 concerns you may have encountered that should be referred to a guidance counselor. Number 1, extreme mood or behavioral changes. For example, if you have a student who's usually happy but begins acting sad with a lack of interest in their surroundings, it's quite possible that something bigger is going on in that student's life that's impacting their mood. A guidance counselor can help by providing your student with one-on-one time to talk in a relaxing atmosphere. Number 2, excessive sleepiness. If a student starts to nod off from time to time, try helping them by allowing them to stand or get water. If the student consistently has trouble staying awake, it could be a sign of a larger problem. Perhaps the student isn't getting enough sleep due to a situation at home. Let the guidance counselor know, and they can work with you to help you find a solution. Number 3, a bullied student. If you're a good classroom manager, you can likely make sure that a student isn't picked on during your class. But you may see signs like isolation or other students laughing when the bullied student talks. Remember that most bullying takes place outside of the class, in the hall, during lunch, or recess. If you believe a student is bullied, the situation is bigger than your classroom and you should involve a counselor for follow-up. We are here today with Tara Mowry, elementary school counselor. Miss Mowry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we want to talk a little bit today about the guidance counselor, the school counselor position. What are some duties of the school counselor?
Just for basic responsibilities, we work with kids in many different ways. We work with them individually on a variety of problems that they may be dealing with, maybe social emotional issues or something at home. Could be academics, they're having trouble in the classroom in a certain area. We also run a lot of small groups for students, and that's reaching the same topics, but being able to work with more students at one time. And then we'll also work with the whole classroom setting. We'll do what we call classroom guidance lessons. And those are also around a variety of topics, such as social emotional learning. We'll do careers lessons, talk about bullying and strategies for dealing with that. So really trying to reach the students in many different aspects, but also supporting teachers throughout that process as well.
Can you tell me a little bit more about some of the things that counselors can do to help teachers and vice versa?
Sure, yeah. So teachers will often refer students to me if they're having, maybe they come in and they're having a difficult morning, or they mention something that maybe happened on the bus with a friend or at home. So they may contact me to just touch base with that student individually. They'll also let me know if they hear of something going on or feel like the child would be beneficial for a small group. So we do a lot of communicating with teachers. As far as classroom guidance goes, they may let me know, my class is really struggling with solving conflicts. Could you come and support us and help us learn how to support and teach students how to solve those conflicts, both behaviorally and academically, just helping them do their best in school.
Yeah, great. So a very wide variety of
A
things.
lot of different things, yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about teachers and building those positive relationships with students that we know are so important. Is there a way that you can help teachers with this type of process also?
Yeah, so we do a lot of communicating school-wide about how to connect with your students. If you don't connect with your students on a personal level, it's very hard to, I think, teach them academically, but also help them with any social emotional things that they may have going on. So one thing we talk to teachers about is noticing your students. Notice when they're doing something well and commenting on it, just to make that connection that, hey, I see you and I know you're here and you're a valuable member of my classroom.
Give them that directed attention to really build up the relationship.
Right, yeah, let them know that you're interested in who they are as a whole.
Yeah, wonderful. Miss Mallory, when I was teaching in high school, we usually called it the guidance office, and that's how we referred to it and how we've referred to it a couple times in this episode. But as we know, education changes, roles within the school change, and so now that I'm hearing that school counselor is maybe more the appropriate term. Can you tell us a little bit about that evolution and why that change happened?
Sure. I think when our positions were first put into schools, we were mostly at the high school level. And the focus of guidance counselor's job was to help guide students in the direction towards career or college. And so they were helping them make those connections to later in life of what their next step would be after school. Now that we are in all of the school levels from elementary through high school and doing a very wide range of activities within the building, we're not just focused on the career readiness path. That is definitely still a part of what we do, but there's also a big push to help children learn social emotional needs and help them be successful also academically. And so the school counselor term just kind of wraps around all of the things that we do as part of our job in addition to maybe the guidance piece.
So also, we're talking a little bit about what teachers should be able to manage on their own. They do have all these wonderful resources like school counselors, like administrators when they need them. But what are some types of maybe behaviors or events that they should be able to manage on their own?
From an elementary perspective, I would like to see teachers try to help students manage conflict within the classroom, first by maybe talking with the students, maybe putting some strategies in place for separating them if need be, before they would call for support from somebody else. Really trying to keep the kids in their classroom environment as much as possible, unless it becomes a safety issue or a major disruption to learning for everybody in the class.
Yeah, so teachers are the first line for minor disruptions, and then if
Most
that
definitely.
doesn't work, then they can look somewhere else.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Or if there's repeated issues, like if the teachers have tried to reteach the classroom expectations and tried really hard to give the student tools for working through whatever they're doing, but they're still having the same issue over and over and over again, then potentially looking for support on what else to do.
Something that's become chronic.
Right. Once you've exhausted all your other tools or
Right.
your things that you know how to do.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Live from the EPI studio, it's the Launch Your Classroom Challenge. Our contestants today are wellness expert Amanda, support specialist Samuel, and from Lunch Your Classroom, Heather. And here's our host, Kyle Pope.
Thank you, Johnny. The rules of today's game are I am going to read a student behavior scenario to our contestants, and then they are going to hold up a sign with a letter on it that lets me know where they think the issue should be handled. We have A for the administrator. We have G for the guidance counselor. And we have C for keep it in the classroom. Today's winner will get to join me at the Q&A after the show. And also, if you're watching at home, please feel free to play along. Let's get started. Here is our first scenario. Jonah usually keeps to himself and doesn't speak much to other students. When you call on him to answer questions during class, several other kids snicker. He frequently asks if he can go to the school nurse because he has a headache. Today, when you assign him work with a group, he ignores your directions and stays in his seat. How should you handle this situation? All right, take a second to think about your answer. Go ahead and make your final selections and reveal your answer, please. All right, we have 3 G's for guidance office. Amanda, why did you select guidance office?
It's a pattern that you've observed for a period of time. It's clear that he is not happy at school and that he also doesn't have positive connections at school. So that's really a place where you need to get more information. You should go to that counselor and see if there are ways that you can connect with this child and find out a little bit more context.
Moving on to our next scenario. Samantha and Michelle sit beside each other and usually get along. After Michelle comes back to her seat, she notices that her jacket is missing. She accuses Samantha of stealing the jacket and putting it in her book bag. Samantha claims she didn't do it, but refuses to let you look inside her bulky book bag. What would you do in this situation? All right, think about your answers. All right, make your final selections and reveal your answers, please. All right, you all selected A, Administrator's Office. Samuel, can you tell me why you selected Administrator's Office?
Sure. So, with this kind of situation, you could try to find out some information from both students to see what happened. But because there is personal property involved, we want to make sure that we follow the school's rules and guidelines for dealing with stuff like that, because we don't want to break any kind of procedures that your school has in place.
All right, very good. All right, and our last scenario today. Manish has not been paying attention during your lesson. Instead, he's been speaking with the student next to him. You've tried a hand signal and you've tried proximity control, but neither strategy has worked. What should you do with this misbehavior? All right, think about your answer. And reveal your answers, please. Wonderful, you've all selected Keep It in the Classroom. Heather, can you tell us why you selected Keep It in the Classroom?
This is all a part of your discipline plan that you have in class. So at the beginning of the year, you're going to set up those rules and those consequences with your students. You're going to make those expectations very clear. And so obviously you're not going to stop at proximity as your last step before, escalating it to administration or elsewhere. You're going to stay in the class. You're going to try something else. So whether that is talking with the student after class or then, involving parents, you can determine that based on the plan that you already have set in place.
Great job today, guys. You all have perfect scores. You did wonderfully. So I got to break the tie somehow. So I'm going to ask you to select a number between 1 and 10. All right. The winner will get to join me in the Q&A. Amanda, what's your number?
Well, because I'm a winner, I'm going to say number 1.
Oh, wow. All right. Samuel, what's the number you picked?
I think I'm going to go with 5.
5. All right.
I like the number 5.
Solid choice right in the middle. And Heather, what number will you select?
I'll go with lucky number 7.
7. Great choice. All right, so to find out who won today's challenge, please tune in for the Q&A, and thank you so much for watching Launch Your Classroom Challenge.
Let's take a second and breathe together. Close your eyes. Breathe in and out. Slowly and deeply. In and out. Open your eyes. How are you feeling? Maybe focused, a little clearer. Breathing is one of the most important things we do, but in our busy lives, we pay the least amount of attention to it. By harnessing the power of our breath, we can soothe and relax ourselves in just about any situation. Imagine you're going to a stressful meeting with your principal. As you grow nervous, your breathing becomes fast and short, which triggers the body's animalistic stress responses, such as a fast heartbeat and sweaty palms. Studies show that the fastest way to manage this type of stressful situation and anxiety is to take a second and slow our breathing. If you find your anxiety increasing, focus only on the air flowing in and out. Notice how your heartbeat slows and the way your body relaxes. When you find your mind wandering during the day, or your anger and stress increasing, even the busiest teacher can find 30 seconds to take a few deep breaths. Let go of the negative thoughts or feelings as your breath brings you back to center.
What a wonderful, easy technique that we could all use. So luckily we got Amanda back in the studio today. Amanda, it's so good to have you back.
Thanks, good to see you again.
Great. So what would you say to a teacher who doesn't think they have enough time in the day to do this exercise?
Well, I would say you don't have enough time to breathe. You're literally breathing every second of the day. Just do it with a little bit of focus. Just think about your breathing. That's kind of the key here. And this isn't something that you need 30 minutes to do. You can take 30 seconds and it's still going to be effective.
But what about in a high pressure, intense situation? Say you have a student who is misbehaving in front of the class, they're being distracting, you've got 30 kids looking back at you, waiting for your response, you're upset at this point. What would you recommend for a teacher in that type of situation?
Well, for one, this isn't the kind of thing where you have to go shut yourself in a dark room and close your eyes, okay? You can take that beat, take those 2 deep breaths, and that is really gonna help not only you to respond to the situation, but also the student, because you're gonna calm yourself, you're gonna have a second to think about the best course of action, and you're not gonna respond in anger or with a stressed, lash out response.
Long term, say you have a student who has issues going on that are totally beyond your control. Say that they have some things happening to them at home, and when something like this bad occurs over a long period of time, we're not sure how to deal with it and deal with the stress that comes with those long-term situations. So what do you think about that situation?
Well, with those types of situations, it can be really hard to not internalize all of those things, especially when you're a teacher, maybe spending time with a troubled student every day, and you can't control so many of these things that are causing them problems. So that's when this type of breathing technique as a practice, as a daily practice, can really be effective and really be helpful for you. Because what it does is it focuses you on yourself and on the present moment. And when there are a lot of things we can't control, this is where we can come back to ourselves and say, okay, how can I move forward now? What can I do now? What's the best course of action from this current moment?
Yeah, so instead of focusing on what we can't control, focus on what we can control in the context of those routines.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for joining us again.
Well, thank you. It's been great to be back.
Today, we've talked a lot about student misbehavior and when you might have to refer them to an administrator or a guidance counselor. When dealing with the stress of classroom management, it's important to remember that you are not alone. Your school has a team of experienced professionals who can provide you with the support that you need in extreme situations, and they're ready to help. But extreme situations are usually rare. Keep in mind that the best form of classroom management is the kind that stays in the classroom. On a day-to-day basis, you will be responsible for keeping your class safe, productive, and under control. Handling tough situations isn't easy, but you can do it. Let your students see you as a fair classroom manager, and I guarantee that you'll get positive results. Thank you, and I hope you'll join us for the Q&A.
All right, thanks for watching and for the great questions we've been getting in the chat, our social media channels, and emails. We're going to answer as many of these as we can today. Remember, if you have any questions about when to refer students to other resources in your school, put them in the chat and we'll answer them live. Joining us today for the Q&A is, as always, the host of Launch Your Classroom Live, Kyle Pope. Kyle, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Has anybody seen a dinosaur around here?
And also joining us today is the co-host of Launch Your Classroom Live and EPI's Director of Program Services, Ryan Hennessy. Thanks for joining us, Ryan.
Thank you, Johnny.
And our third chair today will be filled by the winner of the tiebreaker from the Launch Your Classroom Challenge. Kyle, what number were you thinking of?
Lucky number 7.
Aha, then that means joining us today is support expert Heather Thompson. Congratulations on winning, Heather.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's take a look at our first question. Monette asks, great information. Is there an easy rule to follow for when to manage students and when to ask for help? Kyle?
Thank you, Manette. Yeah, I wouldn't say there's an actual rule to follow, but I would say there's a loose guideline that you can follow. Anytime you're dealing with something that may be criminal in nature, you want to go to the administrator. That's something like the violence that we talked about, or possession of illegal substances. That's definitely something that needs to go beyond you. When you're dealing with something that is social or emotional that goes out of the scope of your classroom, could be a home situation or something that's happening out in school but not in your class, that's definitely a time to go to the guidance counselor. And when it's a minor misbehavior, like some of the stuff we've discussed today, like talking or inattention, that's stuff that you generally want to keep inside your classroom. So yeah, that's not a strict rule, but that's some general guidelines for you to follow. Thank you.
All right. Up next, we have a question from Olivera. Is it proper to address the whole group or just the individual who makes the problem? Do you have any thoughts on this, Kyle?
Yeah, so I say it depends on how many students that you have misbehaving at the time and how major the misbehavior is. If there's several of them, yeah, I think it's definitely appropriate to address the group or refer back to your rules, go over which one that they may be violating, or explain your expectations again. If it's just one student, though, I would kind of avoid this. As students like to be seen as individuals, and sometimes if you call out a whole group, they'll think that you may not have recognized them specifically, so they may continue along with the misbehavior. So, if you're wanting to avoid embarrassment, there's always going up to them, proximity control, talking softly to them, giving them a note, that type of thing. But I think that a lot of times that misbehavior, especially at the high school level, is best addressed specifically to an individual. Ryan, is there any type of difference for elementary?
I think so. A lot of the things that you said are constant in the lower grades as well. I think in most cases, unless you're dealing with an issue of safety, if you think that anyone in your class, including the student who may be misbehaving, is in danger, you really should avoid addressing the whole group. A lot of times that can call attention to a student, where that kind of attention is really only going to further separate you from that student, and certainly that's usually not our intention. So I would keep that individual unless there is a danger.
All right, thanks, guys. Up next, we have a question from Marcia. What do I do with a student who continues to misbehave in class, and when I contact the child's parent, the parent refuses to come in to address the issues with the child? Ryan, any thoughts on this one?
Absolutely, I have thoughts on this one. I think most of us who've been in the classroom for any length of time have had students who continue to misbehave, although we have certainly used a lot of different strategies to try to curb it. Now, when it comes to parents not being able to come to the classroom or to address issues with the child at home, I think here is a good time as a teacher to stop and take some time to really try to understand the situation from every aspect. I know in my personal experience, there were parents who worked hours, just to kind of keep that family going, and those hours weren't always conducive with the school day. Additionally, the child themselves may have a diagnosis or something undiagnosed that the parent themselves have been dealing with for a few years, and they're, frankly kind of exhausted and they're not sure what to do. So Marcia, in this case, what I would do is, again, seek to understand, go see the guidance counselor, even the administrator if the misbehavior is dangerous, but start with the guidance counselor and ask them, have these issues been present in previous years? Has there been a change, an escalation? Have the parents ever been involved? Really try to get as much information as you can, and once you have that information, partner with the guidance counselor for a way forward. Thank you.
All right. Up next, we have a question from Edward. When students are fighting with each other right in the classroom during the class and attract a group of students from another class to join, what can we do? Guys, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely do. Hi, Edward. So, as Mr. Barber, who interviewed with Kyle on today's episode, mentioned, the key word here is students fighting. And there is an even greater danger in that it says they're attracting groups of students. So certainly that would be a situation that is a dangerous one. So regardless of how many times it happens, you need to meet that kind of behavior with any kind of aggression like that. You need to meet it with the response of letting the administrator know. I would also, after you've gotten the situation kind of normalized, I would always document that in some notes, anecdotally, whatever. Because if some of those same students continue to show aggression, that then could be useful to a guidance counselor in figuring out whether or not that student needs some other kind of intervention. Thanks, Edward. Good luck.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Our next question is from Linford. How can I have a school counselor speak with my students and still have time to teach all my curriculum? Heather, what do you think?
Thank you for your question, Linford. So like Ms. Mallory said during the interview, school counselors might have these classroom guidance lessons that they come in to teach with your whole class. And so while this might take up a lot of teaching time, I think it's important to look at it as being part of your overall and an integral part of your classroom management plan. Because you and the counselor are taking the time to address some real issues and maybe even whole class issues that need to be addressed. And of course, as you know, when you have a solid classroom management plan, then that really kind of allows more time for instructional time because you're not having to go out of your way to manage all of these behaviors. Instead, you're able to kind of catch that problem ahead of time or, right when it starts so it doesn't escalate any further. So while it might feel stressful in the short term, to take from that teaching time initially, just know that, it's really going to help you in the long run.
Thanks, Heather. Up next, Geraldine wants to know, what should a teacher do when students answer back, "What did I do?" answering in a sarcastic way when teacher asks them to be seated or asks them to be quiet? Kyle?
Thanks, Geraldine. Yeah, usually they know exactly what they did. They're just trying to engage you in kind of what we looked at earlier in a back and forth. So it's important for you as a teacher to maintain control in that situation. If you need to restate your instructions at that point, go ahead and do that. The last thing you want to do is start going down a line of questioning with them that's never going to end. If that doesn't seem to satisfy them, tell them that you can speak about it later. Or go ahead and move the class on to something else and address it more closely at that point. But the worst thing you could do at this point would be engage with them, get more sarcastic back with them. That's not going to solve anything. So just restate it and talk to them later if you need to. Thank you.
Okay. Sasha asks, if I get my administrator involved with an out-of-control learner, won't she think I'm a bad teacher and give me a poor evaluation? Ryan?
Thanks, Sasha. I can relate to this question. I think all of us want to prove, both to our principal and our colleagues and to ourselves, that we're extremely capable. So I would remind you to remember that a truly out-of-control student needs other teammates at your school to be involved. So you definitely should not take that as a reflection on your inabilities at all. In fact, I think the greater sign of strength here is being able to recognize when a learner has escalated to the point that you need some more eyes, some more help in that classroom, and then you act in such a way that you keep everyone in that room safe. In no way does that mean that you were a bad teacher, and in fact, as Mr. Barber said again, your administrators want to know, because that means you are monitoring your classroom. Therefore, I think you'd have a better chance of getting a higher mark in evaluation. So stay strong, Sasha, and good luck.
Okay. Our next question comes from Tiago. My principal recently observed my class and said I needed classroom management help. What should I do? What should Tiago do, Kyle?
Hey, Tiago, thanks for the question. Yeah, first I would try to set aside some time where you can speak with your principal a little bit more in depth on this situation. They saw, what they felt was poor classroom management or classroom management needs some assistance. Maybe they witnessed some specific behaviors. Get them to let you know exactly what they saw, and then go ahead and ask them what they expect you to do in those situations to get some advice. You can also ask them, who are other teachers in the school that are good classroom managers, that he respects as classroom managers, and you can go and observe them. If you know the behaviors that he's talking about specifically, there's a great resources online. You just search for those specific behaviors. And if you're a program member, you can always reach out to us here at Support, and we can help you with any specific classroom management issues that you have. So thank you.
Thanks, Kyle. Abril wants to know, I have a meeting with the counselor to speak about a student. How can I prepare? Heather, how could Abril prepare for this?
Sure. So, first and foremost, it's going to be good to have a behavior tracking form. So whatever that looks like, if it's just kind of an Excel sheet, if it's something that you document manually, it's a way for you to track those behaviors. So it allows you to, ideally document the details of the behaviors and the dates that you've noted them, the strategies that you've tried and the outcomes of those strategies, as well as any time that you've reached out to the appropriate parties. So that could be parents or admin. This really kind of gives the guidance counselor, if you're going to meet with them, a clear picture of what you've been seeing, and it gives them some insight on how they can help on their end. And so if you do need an example of a behavior tracking form, we actually have that in the Launch Your Classroom handbook. So that could be a good reference point.
All right. Our next question is coming in from Mohammed. How can I manage the behaviors in the large classes as I will not find enough time to cover the curriculum? Ryan?
Mohammed, thanks for the question. This is kind of the conundrum that a lot of us teachers find. It's like I need to get through the curriculum, the material, and yet I feel like I'm spending all this time on behaviors. And we kind of falsely convince ourselves that it's one or the other. So I would challenge you to think about it this way. How can you manage the behaviors in your large class so that you can find the time to cover the curriculum? And I think what you'll find is, one of the best things about the episode today was the reiteration by our guests that you have a support team at school. I've had large classes, and I've certainly had some behaviors in there to manage. I could not have done it without colleagues, counselors, and administrators. And I don't mean necessarily they come into your class. Most of those people have a lot of experience. Most of those people are special. They have special qualifications. Sit down with them and ask them the question, how can I manage the behaviors so that I can find the time? Without knowing more, I can't be more specific, but I also can't stress enough how important that team is. Good luck, Mohammed.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Jesus wants to know, what about if a student challenges a teacher and does not pay attention to what the teacher's talking about? Some students could join the disturbance. What do you think, Kyle?
Yeah, so Jesus, my first recommendation would be to take a really good look at your rules, take a really good look at your consequences, and take a really good look at yourself to see how consistent you're being with both of those two things. It shouldn't naturally get to this point. I mean, every once in a while we will come across an extremely defiant student, which you very well could be talking about here. And it's important to look for very specific strategies to deal with these types of students. This would be a good time to involve a counselor who could help you a little bit with that student's background, how they've reacted with other teachers in the past. Always a good idea to reach out to former teachers and see how he behaved with them. As far as other students joining in, that's the reason that you need to make sure that you are taking action toward this misbehavior, because if the other students see that you're just going to let this one student not pay attention, this one student challenging you, then yes, they will come along with it. So just make sure that you're taking those appropriate actions, that you're looking at your rules, your consequences, that you're involving a counselor and even parents when needed. So thank you, Jesus.
Okay, we've got time for one more question today, and it is going to be from Epi. can we create a support group where other teachers can address the issues in the class? Also, counselors would be great to be a part of the team, especially for higher level and the larger numbers of pupils. Ryan?
Hey, Epi. So I really love this question because it has in it the seeds of some action, some things you're starting to really think about solutions, which is fantastic. Can you create a support group where other teachers would be able to address issues in the class? Here's what I would say about that. I can't be sure based on what I'm reading here, but I would not invite other teachers into my class with the students to handle it. Instead, I would absolutely suggest that you create a group of professionals, colleagues, maybe you meet weekly or bi-weekly, whatever works, and you bring those notes that you've been keeping, you bring those kind of questions you've been asking here today, and you address them together. I guarantee you, Epi, that you are not the only person seeing these behaviors. I guarantee you that this kind of group would allow you all to share the best practices, and you should most definitely invite the counselor to be part of that. That's the kind of thinking, and those are the kind of teachers with purpose that can change the culture of a school. So I hope that you will do that, and thank you for the thoughtful question.
Well, thank you, Ryan. All right, everyone, that's all the questions we have time for today. Please join us back here in 2 weeks on December 21st at 4 p.m. Eastern for the next episode of Launch Your Classroom. As teachers, we spend the fall developing our rules, procedures, and rapport with our students. Then, here comes the holiday break. In our next episode, we're going to take a look at how to come back from the holidays recharged and ready to continue building an effective classroom. Join us next time for New Year, New Classroom. To get the most out of our next episode, make sure you use the link in the description below to head over to Amazon.com and check out our Launch Your Classroom ebook series. These ebooks are packed with tips, infographics, instructional videos, and so much more. The newest book in the series, Launch Your Classroom Management, Creating a Well-Run Classroom, is available now. Follow the link in the description below to pick up your copy. And remember, to stay up to date on all the free professional development that EPI offers, why not subscribe to our YouTube channel? And while you're at it, click the bell icon to receive notifications when we're live. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time.